I turned 41 on April 23 in Beacon Hill, Boston, and I baked myself a Boston cream pie in my tiny kitchen with fresh vanilla custard and dark chocolate that gleamed under the light. The apartment smelled sweet and warm. The green tablecloth was ironed flat on my wooden table. 2 plates set and a single candle waited in the box. I called my son Jake, 22. He picked up with the tone people use when they are already done with the conversation. "Mom, we already have a reservation. Just save us a slice." I stood there holding the phone, looking at the pie I had spent hours making. The window was open and a spring breeze carried the sound of tourists on Charles Street. My chest tightened, but I forced a smile he could not see. "Enjoy your dinner." His voice was already fading because someone beside him was laughing. Later that evening, my phone buzzed. A notification from Instagram. Sloan, his girlfriend, posted a boomerang of champagne glasses clinking. The caption read, $300 lobster dinner beats store brand cake. There were laughing emojis under it. In the comments, one of her friends wrote, "Old moms love leftovers." My throat went dry. For a minute, I just stared at the picture, zooming in without meaning to. Jake was smiling, wide teeth, white hair styled wearing a shirt I bought for his birthday. I worked double shifts to afford that shirt, and yet here he was acting like I never existed. My phone buzzed again. A pending charge alert from my bank. I opened it. $25. A reservation hold from Harbor and Hearth. My card, not his. He had used my card to place the reservation, and now they were fees because the card information did not match the diner name. I sat down at the table and looked at the pie. The chocolate glaze had set beautifully. I should have felt proud, but humiliation washed over me. I lit a single candle, not 72, not 50, just one. I sang Happy Birthday softly. My voice cracked in the middle, but I finished the song because someone had to. I blew the candle out alone. The flame went out with a small sigh. I cut one slice for myself and tried to eat, but the sweetness felt heavy. I swallowed tasted chocolate and salt because tears reached my mouth before I could stop them. I poured myself cheap champagne I had been saving. The cork flew too fast and the bottle foamed over, spraying all over the table. It soaked into the green cloth I ironed that morning. I let out a short, sad laugh because life sometimes knows how to mock you without words. I cleaned it with a kitchen towel. Then I sat very still. Something in me finally broke. Not loud, not violent. Quiet like a chair leg snapping under slow weight. I took a pen and a small piece of paper. My hand did not shake. I wrote the words slowly. "Enjoy your lobster. I will enjoy my self-respect." I folded the note and slid it under the pie tray. Then I walked to the breaker box and switched off the power. Every room fell silent. I turned off the water. I locked the deadbolt from the outside. The hallway light flickered as I rolled my blue folder out of the closet. Inside were copies of my bank statements, printed emails, and above all, the ledger I kept by hand for years. I never planned to use it against my own child. Every grocery bill I covered, every gas tank I filled, every emergency I paid for. So many emergencies that did not look like emergencies once I found the Instagram photos. When you are a young mother at 19, you learn to stretch dollars. You learn how to keep promises. You learn to give up everything just to make sure your kid does not feel poor. And somewhere along the way, you forget that you are allowed to expect love in return. I walked out to my car. My old blue Honda started with a cough, then settled. I pulled away from Beacon Hill, from the pie, from the dark apartment, and from the version of myself who waited for their call. The night air smelled like the sea as I drove north toward Marblehead, where my Aunt Miriam lived. She always told me that self-respect is quiet, but it moves mountains. Around 1 in the morning, I reached her house. Lights were off, but the porch light on a motion sensor lit my face. I rang the bell once. She opened the door in slippers and a robe. Her face softened because she understood everything just by looking at me. She pulled me into a hug without asking questions. I could still smell the chocolate and the cheap champagne on my sleeve. I whispered, "It is my birthday." She whispered, "Come in." We sat at her kitchen table and she poured me warm tea. She did not tell me Jake would come around. She did not say he did not mean it. She just listened. For the first time in a long time, I felt safe. I placed the blue folder on her table and said, "I am done being an ATM." She nodded once. Then we both looked at the front door like we expected someone to knock. I knew Jake and Sloan would return to my apartment after their lobster dinner. They would find darkness, a locked door, and the note under the pie. "Enjoy your lobster. I will enjoy my self-respect." They would freeze just like I once froze every time they asked me for money. The roles had finally changed, and as I sat in that quiet Marblehead kitchen, I took a breath long and steady and allowed myself to feel something I had not felt in years: peace. You ever had a birthday where someone told you to save them a slice like you were just a refrigerator, if you have typed the word respect? When I turned 19, I was standing behind a supermarket register in Somerville, wearing a faded red vest and name tag, pregnant with Jake, and too stubborn to cry in front of customers. I worked 2 jobs from the very beginning full-time as a floor supervisor during the day and part-time slicing deli meats at night. I fed Jake mashed carrots in the break room when I could not afford a babysitter, and sometimes a cashier would hold him while I ran to the restroom to splash cold water on my face. When you become a mother that early, you do not get a handbook. You learn by scraping pennies together and hoping your child never sees how scared you are. I opened his 529 college plan when he was 3 months old, putting away small pieces of every paycheck. When Jake turned 10, I sold a silver ring my grandmother had given me. It was only worth $120, but I used it to buy 2 tickets to a Red Sox game because Jake kept pointing at the billboard on the bus, saying, "Someday, Mom." He ate nachos, cheered for every swing, and told me it was the best day of his life. I never said it out loud, but it was one of mine too. By the time Jake turned 22, his college plan had grown to $38,700. That money was untouched. It survived rent increases, broken fridges, Jake's dental bills, and my car repairs. Every time I wanted to dip into it, I told myself, no, this is his future. I kept working at the supermarket, moving up to assistant manager. It was not glamorous, but I paid the bills. Jake found part-time jobs sometimes as a barista, sometimes delivering groceries, but his money disappeared fast, swallowed by sneakers, dinners, and whatever new tech he liked that month. The first time I felt something crack was a rainy Tuesday in February 2024. We were in the kitchen and Jake had invited Sloan over for dinner. I made spaghetti because it was cheap and filling and I thought it would make him feel at home. Sloan took a photo of the plate and whispered something. Jake smirked and said to her, "You know my mom. Budget mom always finds a way to save $3. He said it like a joke, but it landed heavy. I laughed, softly, pretended I did not hear, but I washed dishes slower so they would not see the way my hands shook. After that came the door drop visits. Jake would text, "I'm downstairs, can you bring the cash?" And I would go down to the street, hand him $40 or $60, and he would hug me quickly before running back to the car where Sloan waited. The whole exchange would take maybe 3 minutes. He never came upstairs, never asked if I had eaten, never saw the groceries stacked in the corner, or the birthday cards taped on the fridge he used to draw when he was little. Money always came with a small story. "My tank is empty. I will pay you Friday." The job miscalculated tips. They lost my hours. My phone bill doubled. My sneakers are falling apart. But when I found pictures of him wearing new shoes and eating brunch at trendy places in Chestnut Hill, I learned to pretend I did not see. The bank notifications were the worst. One morning, I woke up to 3 overdraft fees, $72 total, because Jake had borrowed my debit card to get gas and forgot to reimburse me before the automatic bill payment cleared. I spent that entire shift rearranging shelves with a headache, praying the register drawer balanced so I would not have to explain an extra shortfall. When the BNPL charges started appearing, I tried to ignore them too. Jake bought sneakers for $189 on an installment plan and paid late, so there was an $18 fee. The company tried charging his card and it bounced, so it hit mine attached to my family phone plan. I sat on hold with customer service twice fighting to reverse it, but in the end, I paid just to end the stress. Every month, Jake's phone line was $75 on my family plan. Sometimes he paid me back. Often he did not. The unpaid balance rolled over, and service providers never care about excuses. One night in March 2025, we were having dinner and he casually asked for the 5M29 login. He stirred his pasta without looking up. "I just want to see the interest, Mom," I said gently. "I will handle it, baby. You focus on work." He looked irritated and muttered, "You treat me like a kid." Sloan nodded, eyes glued to her phone. "He is 22, Erica. He can check his own account." I did not answer because I knew something was wrong. Later that week, Sloan posted a photo of Jake wearing those sneakers. The caption said, "Treat yourself." All I saw was the $18 transaction fee and the 40 minutes I spent explaining to customer service why my bank rejected a charge I never approved. Small things chip away at you the way water shapes stone. You tell yourself it is harmless. You tell yourself it is normal. You tell yourself every mother helps her child. But then one day you blink and realize you are the only one giving. My coworkers used to laugh at how I brought homemade pastries to the break room every Sunday. Baking kept me calm. One afternoon, I was delivering a special order to a loyal bakery customer, a nice older gentleman in Beacon Hill. I rushed there on my lunch break, flour still dusted across my sleeve because I forgot to clean my apron. He opened the door, smiled kindly, and said, "Pastry boss, you look like a flour snowman." I laughed so hard I nearly cried, because for a moment someone saw me as a human being, not a wallet with a pulse. On the drive home, I thought about the nights I sat up waiting for Jake to come home safe. The mornings I ironed his shirts, the times I walked through snow to deliver forgotten homework. A mother's love is not a loan, it is a gift. But somewhere along the years, the gift had turned into obligation, and every obligation had turned into expectation. By March 2025, Jake owed me more in late fees and forgotten promises than I ever dared tally, but I kept my ledger anyway. Not because I wanted payback, because I needed to see the truth in ink. When you write down the facts, you stop telling yourself lies. Looking back now, the signs were everywhere. I just was not ready to see them. April arrived in Boston with bright wind off the harbor and tulips opening along Seaport Boulevard. My birthday had passed only a week earlier, but the quiet in my apartment still felt heavy, like the last candle smoke had settled in my lungs. One morning, I was stocking shelves at the supermarket when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Mrs. Patel, my neighbor 2 floors down. She wrote a cheerful line asking if my birthday dinner had been lovely. For a moment, I stared at the screen, unsure how to respond. I typed, "Yes, thank you," then deleted it. I typed it again, deleted it one more time, and finally sent a short, "It was quiet." She sent a heart emoji, unaware of the ache behind those words. During my lunch break, I sat in the employee lounge, scrolling through Instagram, mostly checking photos of nieces, nephews, and coworkers' pets. Then I saw it. A new reel from Sloan. The caption said, "Best night in Boston," with a sparkle emoji. In the video, Jake sat at Harbor and Hearth with a plate of lobster in front of him, holding up a champagne glass as Sloan filmed. The sticker over the clip said, "Treat yourself." I watched twice to be sure my eyes had not played tricks. They were at the exact restaurant I once told Jake I dreamed of going to for my birthday someday. Not only had he gone without me, he had gone on the night I sat alone with my Boston cream pie. People commented with hearts and wow emojis. Sloan tagged Jake. She did not tag me. Of course she did not. I rubbed my forehead, embarrassed, without anyone in the room to see me. When I walked home later that day, Mrs. Patel caught me by the mailboxes. She's a sweet Indian grandmother who waters her lilies every morning and leaves small packets of ginger candy in our lobby during holidays. She smiled warmly and asked, "Was your birthday dinner beautiful, dear?" I swallowed hard and said, "It was quiet, Mrs. Patel." I tried to keep my voice steady, but she noticed the tremble in my throat and squeezed my hand gently before heading upstairs. That evening, I heated leftover pasta and watched the harbor news. Halfway through my meal, my phone chimed with a bank alert. Pending tip $8.50. Harbor and Hearth. My card. For a second, I felt confusion. Then anger warmed in my chest. They had used my card again. I scrolled through my banking app and saw the charge a prepaid hold for the restaurant that had not cleared properly. I texted Jake asking if he remembered using my card. He replied, "Can I Venmo you later?" I sat back in my chair, staring at the words. The disrespect was not loud. It was casual, careless, like I was a vending machine that occasionally beeped. Later that night, I clicked the comments under the reel. One of Sloane's friends wrote, "Somebody is spoiled." Sloane replied she hoards money in that 529 and will not even help. I stared at the sentence, reading it over and over. It felt like ice water poured down my back. She was talking about me. She was talking about the money I had saved since Jake was 3 months old. She made it sound like selfishness instead of sacrifice. A few people reacted with laughing emojis. My hands shook. I wanted to type something sharp, but my throat closed and my mind went blank. Instead, I pressed the phone against my chest and sat quietly trying to steady my breathing. I woke the next morning tired and hollow. On my way to work, I stopped by a coffee shop for a $2 filter coffee, the only treat I allowed myself that week. While waiting for change, I checked my email. There was a message from the restaurant stating there would be a no-show fee of $25 for a missed reservation processed using the card on file. My heart pounded as I typed back asking for information. The manager replied politely that the reservation had been made with my name, my phone number, and my card. I asked where the booking came from. He sent the IP and email used for the online reservation. It matched Jake's device. It was not a misunderstanding. It was not a one-time slip. It had been intentional. Somehow, seeing that detail in writing made everything real. My son had booked an expensive reservation on my birthday, used my card to hold the spot, and then gone without me. I closed my eyes and pictured him laughing in that reel while I sat alone, blowing out a single candle. That image burned deeper than any words could. When I got home, I made tea and sat at my small kitchen table. The steam curled in the air. I opened my laptop and started reading how to dispute unauthorized charges. The bank representative on the phone sounded tired but kind. He confirmed that if my card had been used without permission, I had the right to request a chargeback. He asked for details. As I explained, my voice softened. Part of me felt guilty. He is my son. I should protect him. But another part of me, the part that had been stepped on for too long, whispered, "Protect yourself." After the call, I filled out the online dispute form, uploaded a screenshot of the email confirming the reservation originated from Jake's account, and submitted it. Less than 2 hours later, I received an email saying the chargeback was approved and the no-show fee would be reversed. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled. It was a small victory, only $25, but it felt like a pebble in the quiet stillness of a pond. Later that evening, I checked the restaurant page again. The reservation linked to Jake's contact had been removed, canceled, because the card on file was flagged. I imagined him arriving there next weekend to book another celebration and being told that reservation services were unavailable due to an issue with his payment method. I did not smile widely. Just a soft curl of satisfaction touched my lips. I was not out for revenge. I simply wanted one moment where I was not the one hurting. I wanted to know I could draw a line, even a thin one. I washed the dishes slowly, letting the warm water relax my tired hands. The hum of the fridge was the only sound in the kitchen. The night outside was quiet, and for the first time in a long while, my heartbeat matched that quiet instead of fighting against it. The next morning, I brought cinnamon pastries to the break room. My co-workers teased me and called me pastry boss again. I smiled because they did not know what small war had been won the night before. They just saw a woman with flour on her sleeve carrying sweetness in a cardboard box. But inside me, a shift had begun. A tiny one. The first drop on a long ride. I just did not know how steep the next turn would be. By late April, I needed air that did not smell like supermarket floors and city bus exhaust, so I drove to Marblehead to stay with Aunt Miriam for a while. Her small blue house stood near the rocky shoreline, paint peeling in places, but the porch faced the ocean and the salt wind always made the world feel wider. I arrived with a grocery bag of clothes and the blue folder tucked under my arm. She opened the door, took one look at my eyes, and said, "Come inside, honey." No questions, no judgment, just soft light and the smell of lavender soap. We sat at her kitchen table with mugs of chamomile tea. I told her everything: the restaurant, the Instagram reel, the chargeback, the lingering feeling that my own child saw me as an ATM with 2 feet. She listened carefully, her silver hair pulled back with a loose clip, her eyebrows drawn together in quiet concentration. When I finished, she tapped the table twice. "Erica, this is not normal. You know that, right?" I tried to shrug it away, but she leaned closer. "This is emotional and financial abuse." That phrase was like someone opened a window in a room I had been suffocating in. I whispered, "The ledger is getting too long." She asked to see it. I opened my folder and slid the lined notebook across the table. It was not fancy, just dates and amounts written in blue pen with shaky handwriting. She read slowly. Apartment deposit, $2,400. Car repair, $1,480. Emergency dental bill, $640. Buy now, pay later. Sneakers, $189 plus 18 late fee. Phone plan, $75 per month times 7. Gas stipend, $60. Surprise emergency, $600. When she added the numbers, she let out a long breath. $18,200. My hand covered my mouth as if the number might fall out and shatter. Miriam said softly, "Do not cry about a number. Cry about the pattern." That made something inside me break open. I had given and given until I could not tell the difference between generosity and fear. 2 days later, I checked my email while sipping coffee on Miriam's porch. A new message blinked at the top. It was from the 529 account. Alert. Withdrawal attempt denied due to authorization mismatch. It listed an IP address, Seaport. My fingers went cold. Someone had tried to withdraw from Jake's college fund. Someone at Seaport. Jake lived with Sloan in Seaport. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. It was not just a mistake or a thoughtless moment. It was intention. The worst part was that I was not even angry. I was numb. When someone chips at you long enough, you stop feeling each hit. I showed the email to Miriam. She did not gasp or panic. She nodded once and said, "Then you protect yourself." That afternoon, we moved into action. I changed every password connected to my bank email phone account and the 529 login. I used long strings of letters and numbers that no one could guess. I enabled 2-factor authentication so any new login would require my face recognition. I added a fraud alert to the 529 account. The representative on the phone asked if I had reason to suspect unauthorized access. I told her yes. There was a pause, then she said, "We will flag the account." I thanked her and hung up. That night, Miriam convinced me to try yoga because she said my shoulders were hunched like a frightened bird. We unrolled 2 rugs in the living room and she followed a beginner video on her laptop. I could not hold half the poses. When I tried to balance on one foot, I tipped backwards and fell straight onto the couch cushion. Miriam burst out laughing and fell sideways on her own mat. She said balance in money first, then balance in yoga. I laughed too, a shaky laugh, but a real one. For a moment, the fear loosened its grip. The next morning, I created a file on my laptop titled Accountability Packet. I scanned my ledger pages, screenshots of bank statements, the denied withdrawal email, and my text conversations with Jake asking for money. I organized everything in chronological order. I added the Instagram post of Sloan calling me a money hoarder. The packet was 27 pages long when I finished. It felt like a story written in numbers. On the last page, I wrote a simple sentence. "This ends now." Later that week, Miriam called her friend Henry, who worked as a lawyer in Salem. He agreed to meet us at a small coffee shop near the harbor. Henry was in his 60s with tired but kind eyes and a trimmed beard. He listened to my story, flipped through the packet, and nodded slowly. He was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, Erica, you have everything you need. You have the records, the timestamps, the financial proof, the texts, and the attempted withdrawal notice. You are not imagining this. He tapped the 529 alert. This alone is serious. I felt my heartbeat in my neck. Henry continued, do not confront them now. Stay silent. Let them show their next move. People like this always do. We will expose this properly and legally when the time comes. The word expose echoed in my head. I had never imagined myself as the kind of woman who exposed anything. I was the quiet one, the fixer, the helper. But something had changed inside me. I looked at the harbor through the window. Boats rocked gently against the pier. The sky stretched wide, unhurried, and honest. I whispered, okay. Henry slid a business card across the table. Call me before you return to Boston. Do not send warnings. Do not send angry messages. Silence can be louder than yelling. When we drove back to Miriam's house, the sunset painted the entire sky orange. The ocean sparkled with soft gold. I sat in the passenger seat gripping the blue folder. Miriam hummed along with an old jazz song playing on the radio. I leaned my head back and closed my eyes. For the first time in years, I did not feel like prey. I felt like a woman preparing her ground. The next turn was coming. I did not know how sharp it would be, but I was not the same scared mother anymore. And when the next blow came, I would be ready. Early May arrived with humid afternoons and city noise echoing through Beacon Hill alleys, and I felt my shoulders tense every time my phone lit up. Silence between me and Jake should have meant peace, but instead it brought a slow, steady dread, like a storm forming far offshore. One morning I was wiping the counter after breakfast when my phone buzzed with a screenshot from a coworker who followed Sloan online. In a group chat, Sloan had written, "Your mom acts like a bank manager with a $20 million trust." The comment was followed by laughing emojis and a picture of a lobster roll, and Jake replied with a shrugging emoji, as though the insult was casual humor. Reading it made my stomach twist. There was no reason to exaggerate that way unless you wanted to make someone look ridiculous. I closed my eyes and tried to breathe because nothing drains you faster than realizing your child is comfortable laughing at your expense. 2 days later, an email arrived addressed to the 529 custodian. The subject line read, "Authorization form to view account." Attached was a picture of my driver's license, poorly cropped with a digital signature that looked nothing like my handwriting. The sender's address belonged to Jake. My arms went cold. He must have taken a photo of my license months ago when I renewed it and left it on the kitchen table. He had copied it without asking. I stared at the message for a long moment, then forwarded it to Henry without a single word. Later that afternoon, a past due utility notice appeared in my mailbox with an address in Seaport. Jake had put the electricity bill in his name when he moved in with Sloan, but apparently they had not paid in 2 months. He sent a message to my phone, "Mom, the power company is threatening shutoff. Can you cover this just once? We will lose the fridge and Sloan will freak." I typed, "I cannot handle this anymore," and deleted it. Then I typed, "maybe next week," and deleted that too. Finally, I sent a short, "I cannot help with this." He replied, "You are letting pride ruin everything. Losing power is losing everything. Please." I put my phone face down on the table and let the message sit unanswered. For years, I thought helping him through every crisis was love, but now I saw it had become dependence. I heated soup and ignored the buzzing. The next day, my phone rang at work. It was Jake complaining about his credit card. He had missed another payment, and the rate jumped to 29.99%. He said life was unfair, the bank was predatory, the world was cruel, everything was against him. I suggested calmly that we could make a simple budget sheet together, list his expenses and income, and build something realistic. He snapped, "Do not mom me. I am not 12. He hung up. I stared at the register screen and waited for my eyes to stop burning. That night, I received a security email from the 529 account. A form had been submitted for access review and flagged due to suspicious metadata. The support message included a short log showing the location of the submission, Harbor and Hearth Wi Fi. I almost laughed. The same restaurant where my birthday had been replaced by lobster and champagne. Sloan must have been sitting there while uploading the fake authorization. The detail was so precise it felt like the universe itself was handing me proof. I forwarded it to Henry. He responded with one sentence: "Save everything." The next morning, I printed a cease and desist letter Henry drafted. It stated clearly that I did not authorize Jake or Sloan to access my financial accounts, that any future attempts would be considered harassment and fraud, and that all contact regarding money should stop. We drove to a small notary office, a quiet place with potted plants and soft jazz playing. The notary stamped the letter and handed it back with a polite smile. It was surreal holding that paper, as if motherhood had turned into a legal boundary instead of a hug. We mailed 2 certified copies, one to Jake and one to Sloan. On the drive home, I kept asking myself, how did we get here? How did a child I rocked to sleep become someone I needed legal protection from? That afternoon, I folded laundry, watered Miriam's herbs, and made a small dinner. The ocean breeze rustled the curtains, and for a moment, life felt gentle again. But the next morning, Jake left me 4 missed calls. Then a text. "Why are you doing this? Sloan is scared you will press charges. This is crazy. Just tell us the 529 password and we can fix everything." I did not respond. Henry told me silence is stronger than argument. If I fought with words, they would twist them. If I stayed quiet, they would reveal themselves. In the late afternoon, I walked to the harbor to clear my head. The tide smelled like salt and seaweed. Boats knocked gently against the docks. I called Henry from a quiet bench and told him everything. He listened and said, "It is time. You choose the place. You set the terms. You hold the ground." His voice was steady. I felt my spine straighten. When I got home, I typed a short message to Jake. 6:30 p.m. Friday, Harbor and Hearth, come alone. No discussion until then. I hit send and placed the phone face down. For a long time, I simply stood in the middle of the kitchen, hands resting on the counter, heart beating slow but firm. The lavender scent from Miriam's soap filled the room. Outside, the sun dipped low, casting the walls in soft, honey-colored light. I whispered to myself, "Not a victim. Not anymore." The appointment was set, and the next turn of the ride waited. The night before the meeting, I could not sleep, so Miriam drove us to Devereux Beach, where the sand felt cold under my shoes, and the moon laid a silver path across the water. Waves rolled in gentle and slow, but my chest felt tight, almost bruised from everything I had been carrying. The wind was soft and cool, but every time I inhaled, my throat ached. We stood close enough to hear the water wash the shore, and I kept thinking of small things that never seemed special until life turned sharp. I remembered the Red Sox game when Jake was 10, the way he cheered with both arms raised and hugged me in the crowded stadium. I remembered selling my silver ring to take him there, a ring that was the only piece of jewelry my grandmother ever gave me. I remembered the store-brand cake I had bought for my birthday because I wanted to believe that a small, sweet thing could still make the day feel like a celebration. I remembered his message, "Save us a slice," as if I were a refrigerator, and not a person, as if my birthday were an afterthought behind lobster plates and champagne. The memories pressed against my ribs and made me feel hollow. Miriam stood beside me, hands in her pockets, quiet but present. She finally said, "You are grieving something that is still alive." That sentence hit me harder than any insult ever could. I sat down in the sand, hugging my knees, staring at the dark water stretching out forever. The loneliness was heavy, heavier than I wanted to admit. But then another feeling bubbled beneath it, slow but certain like heat, rising under cold ashes. I was tired of being stepped on. I was tired of waiting for apologies that never came. I was tired of saving people who did not care if I collapsed. I opened the blue folder and spread the pages across the sand, weighed down with stones, so they would not blow away. Under the moonlight, the documents looked like evidence from someone else's life, as if I were suddenly a witness instead of the victim. Ledger pages with dates and amounts, overdraft fees, buy now, pay later receipts, phone plan bills showing months of unpaid charges, screenshots of Instagram with lobster plates and champagne and mocking laughter, the chargeback confirmation, the IP logs from the attempted 529 withdrawal, the printed cease and desist letter. In the corner of the folder, I tucked a printed copy of the note I left on my birthday. It looked small and quiet, but the words changed my life. Enjoy your lobster. I will enjoy my self-respect. Miriam knelt beside me and tapped the papers. This is your armor. You cannot change what they have done, but you can show the truth. You can stop them from taking one more dollar or one more piece of your dignity. At that moment, I knew I was done waiting for Jake to treat me better. I was done hoping Sloan would grow a conscience. I was done pretending everything was fine. The accountability packet was not revenge. It was clarity. It was me saying, I remember everything you took, and I am done letting you take more. Miriam handed me a folded sheet of paper. It was the handwritten boundary Henry drafted. I read it slowly under the moonlight. I will no longer provide financial assistance. I will not share account access. I will not tolerate disrespect, manipulation, or false claims. No contact for money of any kind. All future communication will be through written form only. I signed it, dated it, and placed it on top of the packet. My hand shook for a moment, but when the ink dried, my fingers steadied. Something inside me clicked into place as if a door inside my chest finally locked. Miriam stretched out a towel and sat beside me. She tried to teach me a breathing exercise she learned from her Tai Chi class. Breathe in strength, breathe out fear. It sounded silly at first, and I rolled my eyes. She poked my arm and said, "Try it, you stubborn mule." I inhaled the ocean air and felt my shoulders drop. She pointed to the papers and said, "Tomorrow is the day you stop shrinking, the day you stop apologizing for existing, the day you say no without guilt." I nodded and whispered, "Not today." Miriam laughed. "Good. Louder." I tried again. "Not today." She grinned. Louder. I shouted into the wind, "Not today." The waves did not care, but I did. My voice echoed back, and something in my soul grew taller. At midnight, Miriam made me practice lines for the next day. If Jake asked for the password, I should say no. If he said he was sorry without proof, I should say, "Not today." If he tried to twist my words, I should say, "This conversation is over." She made me repeat, "Not today," until it sounded like a full sentence, strong and firm. On the drive back to her house, I held the blue folder like it was both shield and sword. I knew Jake would be angry. I knew Sloan would try to make a scene. But I also knew I was not alone. Henry would be there. Officer Ruiz, Henry's friend, promised to sit nearby off-duty in case anything escalated. It was not about violence. It was about witnesses. It was about truth. When we reached Miriam's driveway, I sat in the dark car for a long moment. The porch light glowed soft and warm. Miriam waited with a hand on my shoulder. I asked quietly, "What if he hates me?" She answered, "What if he learns to respect you?" I carried those words inside me like a lighthouse beam. That night, I slept with the accountability packet on the nightstand because it made me feel safe. It was proof that my pain was real, that my love had been taken advantage of, that I was not crazy or dramatic or ungrateful. I was a mother who gave everything and finally realized she had the right to stop. In the early hours of the morning, I wrote a short note for myself. It said, "Any adult who loves you will not ask you to destroy yourself for their convenience." I folded it and tucked it behind the packet. When the sun rose, the ocean smelled like salt and new beginnings. Miriam brewed coffee and kissed my forehead like I was still a child. She reminded me that strength does not mean shouting. Sometimes strength is sitting still while someone else's excuses crash like waves and then choosing to stand anyway. Before we left, she asked if I was ready. I said, "Not today," and she smiled because she knew what I meant. That afternoon, as I prepared for the meeting, I looked at the packet one last time. Ledger, screenshots, bank statements, IP logs, messages, all the invisible wounds made visible. I felt something close, a chapter inside me. This was not the end, but it was the moment the story changed direction. If someone watching my life from the outside were waiting for the moment the quiet woman finds her voice, it would be this night on a Massachusetts beach with moonlit waves, wet sand, and a folder full of truth. If you have ever had to look someone you love in the eye and say, "Not today to protect your future," you already know this is where the real story begins. I arrived at Harbor and Hearth 10 minutes early with the accountability packet in my tote bag and the handwritten boundary folded in my pocket. The restaurant glowed with warm lights and smelled like roasted garlic and lemon butter drifting from the kitchen. The same place where Jake had spent my birthday money on lobster and champagne now felt like a stage set for truth. Henry was already seated at a small table near the window. He wore a navy blazer and carried a thick folder of his own, calm, as if this were another ordinary client meeting. He greeted me with a nod and a hushed voice that steadied my nerves. Officer Ruiz entered a few minutes later, dressed casually in jeans and a gray shirt sitting at a table near ours, as if he were just another guest grabbing dinner. He gave me a subtle glance and a small, reassuring smile. He was off duty, but his presence made me feel safe. At 6:30 exactly, Jake walked in. He looked tired, wearing wrinkled clothes and restless eyes. He slid into the chair across from me and reached for the menu as if this were a casual dinner. He asked where Sloan was. I answered, "Come alone means come alone." He huffed, but said nothing. A waitress placed water on the table. When she left, I pulled the small white envelope from my tote and placed it in front of Jake without a word. Inside was the note I wrote on my birthday. "You chose a $300 lobster over me. I chose a locked door in the law." His face drained of color. He whispered, "Mom, this is dramatic." I opened the accountability packet and laid the first page on the table. A full ledger of $18,200. Dates, amounts, withdrawals, receipts. His eyes darted across the lines and his shoulders tensed. I placed the next page. Screenshots of the Instagram reel. Best night in Boston. Treat yourself. Lobster. Champagne. Jake staring at the camera with no hint of regret. Then the screenshot of Sloan's comment. Old moms love leftovers. Jake swallowed hard. I turned another page. The overdraft fees. The buy now, pay later. Late charges. The phone plan balance. The gas money. The no-show fee, the forwarded email from the restaurant proving the reservation was made with my card, then the IP log showing the attempted withdrawal from the 529 account. At that moment, Jake's breathing became shallow. He whispered, "I did not do that. Someone else used my phone." Henry leaned forward calmly and said, "The IP location is Seaport, the same network used at this restaurant, the same timestamp when your girlfriend was having dinner here." Jake rubbed his forehead. He looked like a trapped animal, half ashamed, half angry. I placed the cease and desist letter in front of him, signed, notarized. He whispered, "Why are you doing this?" I answered, "Because you stopped seeing me as your mother and started seeing me as a credit line." His jaw trembled, and for a moment he looked like he might cry. Then he tried anger instead. "You raised me to ask for help," I replied. "Asking for help is different from draining someone dry." The waitress approached politely, asking if we were ready to order. I said, "Just water for now, thank you." When she walked away, Jake stared at the ledger and whispered, "What do you want?" I pulled out the payment agreement drafted by Henry. "You will repay 50% of what you owe, $9,100. $380 per month for 24 months. No interest, auto pay. $25 late fee for missed payments, 2 late fees, and we escalate to small claims and credit reporting." Jake blinked like someone had slapped him. "You are making me sign a contract." Henry answered calmly, "This protects both of you." Jake looked at me again, and the 529. You will have no access until you complete 2 community college semesters with a B+ average. The money will be paid directly to the school, not to you." Jake leaned back, rubbing his temples. "Mom, you are ruining my life." I answered, "No, I am building a boundary." He whispered, "I cannot afford this." I said, "You could afford lobster. You could afford sneakers. You could afford brunch. You can afford responsibility." A moment passed where the restaurant felt louder than before, plates clattering and conversations rising. Jake folded his arms and stared out the window. Then something changed in his face. His voice softened. "I can try. I will try." I slid a pen across the table. He stared at it but did not pick it up. Suddenly, from the entrance, a voice called Erica. I turned. It was Sloan Phone, raised recording. She shouted, "Look at this! She is forcing Jake to pay her back. She is ruining him." She stepped closer, filming both of us, voice rising. Jake looked mortified. He hissed at her, "Stop it." She ignored him and swung the phone toward my face. The hostess rushed from the counter, asking her to stop filming due to privacy rules. Sloan yelled, "This is harassment." Officer Ruiz stood up, flashed his badge quietly, and said, "Mom, filming people without consent in a private business can be considered harassment." The hostess unplugged the restaurant Wi-Fi to stop the stream. Sloan sputtered in disbelief, insulted the staff, and was escorted toward the door. Jake closed his eyes, ashamed. The room felt still. I finally pushed the payment agreement toward him again. "Either sign or we end here." Silence stretched. Then he signed. His hand shook, but he signed every page. Date, signature, printed name. Henry witnessed it. Officer Ruiz nodded from his table. The waitress returned, asking if we needed anything. I said just the check for Jake. She placed the bill gently. Jake stared at the total. He whispered, "Can I Venmo you later?" Something inside me cracked, but not in a painful way. It was clarity. I said, "No, you will cover it yourself." He handed over his card and waited. When the waitress returned, I placed a small tip with a handwritten note that said, "Thank you for not serving leftovers jokes." It was petty and tiny, but the satisfaction was clean and quiet. Jake folded the payment agreement, tucked it into his jacket, and looked small for the first time in years. He whispered, "Mom, I am sorry." I answered, "I hope so." We stood outside the restaurant where the harbor lights shimmered across the water. The air smelled like salt and night. Jake stuffed his hands in his pockets and walked away with slow, heavy steps. I watched him go, not with anger, but with a strange calm that settled deep in my bones. I was no longer begging to be respected. I had claimed it. For the first time, the ride shifted direction. The quiet woman had said no. June settled over Boston with heavy air and bright mornings, and I woke each day feeling like someone had rearranged the furniture inside my life. The world was the same, but I was not. Word of the harbor and hearth scene spread faster than I expected. The manager confirmed to HR that Sloan had live-streamed customers without permission, and by the second week of June, she had her shifts cut. A week later, she received an official warning about workplace conduct, and when she complained online, people in the comments reminded her that filming strangers was not a constitutional right. The screenshots traveled through roommate groups in Boston, the same ones where Sloan used to brag about fancy dinners. Her reputation as a generous influencer vanished, replaced by a screenshot of her overdue buy now, pay later balance. When the BNPL company sent a final overdue notice of $312, someone in her roommate group posted a meme of a sinking lobster boat. It was childish and mean, but the truth lay underneath. Actions have weight. They land somewhere. Jake texted me on the first Monday of June with a screenshot of his first payment, $380 paid early. He wrote, "I am trying." I stared at the message for a long time and finally typed, "Thank you." Later, he sent another message. "I am sorry." It was the first apology that did not come attached to a request for money, and the simplicity of it made me tear up. I did not reply. There are moments when silence is kinder than any speech. 2 days later, Jake called in a panic. Sloan had used his credit card for a designer bag worth $1,240. She promised to return it or pay the installments, but instead she staged a photo shoot with it, then blocked the seller, and the charge settled onto Jake's account. He reported it as unauthorized, and the bank opened an investigation, but while waiting interest piled quietly like dust. It was his first time feeling how debt can drag a person underwater, and he stopped laughing about budgets. That same week, Jake received a rent past due notice from his landlord. He told me he had picked up a delivery job on weekends and was learning to stretch leftover rice into meals. He said he cooked eggs and toast instead of ordering takeout. He told me he canceled his streaming subscriptions, his gym trial, his clothing app rewards. I did not rescue him. I let the world teach him what my warnings could not. In mid-June, Sloan filed a small claims case against Jake demanding reimbursement for what she called shared living expenses, including takeout orders, cleaning supplies, and the cost of a rug she claimed he spilled coffee on. The judge listened politely and asked for receipts, proof of purchase bank statements, or any clear record of shared agreements. Sloan brought none. The judge dismissed the case with a note saying, "Unsupported claims cannot result in judgment." Jake stood outside the courthouse afterward and texted me, "I messed up, Mom." I answered, "I know." He wrote back, "I am learning." I stared at that sentence for a long time. Learning. I hoped he meant it. One afternoon, Miriam and I tried to cook clam chowder because she said we needed an adventure. We chopped potatoes and onions, warmed milk, added clams from the market, and followed every step carefully, but the soup refused to thicken. It stayed watery and sad. Miriam laughed until tears came, saying, "Money thickens better than flour." We leaned against the counter, laughing too hard because sometimes the only way to survive a heart that has been stepped on is to laugh at a pot of soup that refuses to behave. Jake called later that evening, saying he was exhausted from delivery shifts. He said every time he rode the bike through Seaport, he felt embarrassed as if the city itself were watching him learn responsibility. He asked if we could talk in person. I told him not yet. He needed to keep showing up. He needed to earn more than forgiveness. That weekend, I saw him from a distance outside the apartment building, hands in his pockets. Pace, slow eyes, heavy. I did not go down. He had my address for 22 years, but he had forgotten the stairs until money dried up. I wanted him to remember the steps one by one. At work, my coworkers told me I looked lighter. One said I smiled more. Another said I walked straighter. It felt strange hearing that because inside me there was still a quiet sadness, but there was also strength. The kind that grows only after the storm passes. The city felt different too. When I passed Harbor and Hearth on my lunch break, I walked by the windows without shrinking. That restaurant used to symbolize pain and humiliation, but now it symbolized the moment I stopped being a doormat and started being a woman with a spine. The accountability packet stayed in my tote, not because I needed to use it again, but because it reminded me of the line I drew and refused to erase. Jake's second week payment arrived on time, $380 again. He sent no excuses, no complaints. He said, "Got hired for extra shifts." Trying to pull myself together, I typed "good," then deleted the exclamation mark because I did not want to soften this lesson. He still owed thousands. He still had semesters to complete. He still had a road to walk. But the first bricks of responsibility were finally in place. When I told Miriam about the payments, she hugged me and said, "Love with boundaries is still love." That night, I slept deeply for the first time in months. In the morning, the ocean breeze woke me, and I made coffee smiling for no reason at all. Maybe because my life was no longer leaking energy into a hole that refused to fill. Maybe because healing does not come as a grand event, but as small, quiet mornings, where you realize you are not trembling anymore. June rolled on with heat that shimmered on pavement, and the next turn in this ride was already waiting in the shadows. But for that moment, I stood in sunlight and felt strong. By July, the air in Boston felt heavy with humidity and tension. The hearing at Suffolk County Courthouse was scheduled for a Thursday morning, and the night before I barely slept. Miriam drove me downtown while the city was still waking up. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood, and the echo of footsteps down the hall reminded me of church before a sermon. Henry met us outside courtroom 4 carrying his leather briefcase, the accountability packet resting inside. Officer Ruiz arrived soon after in his uniform, calm and professional. When the clerk called my name, I felt the same chill I had felt on my birthday when the candle went out. The judge was an older woman with gray streaks through her hair and eyes that missed nothing. Henry began by summarizing the case. He handed over the packet with copies of the attempted 529 withdrawal, the notarized cease and desist, and screenshots proving unauthorized access attempts. Officer Ruiz confirmed that he had witnessed the public exchange at Harbor and Hearth and had filed an incident report verifying the documents and signatures. The judge read through everything carefully. She asked a few quiet questions about the 529 account, and Henry explained that any withdrawal made under false authorization could fall under both state and federal jurisdiction. Her face stayed neutral, but she underlined something in her notes. Then she looked at me and said clearly, "Erica, you were right to act when you did. 529 accounts are protected. Unauthorized access is not a misunderstanding, it is potential fraud." The words settled in the room like a gavel strike before the actual sound came. My hands trembled slightly on the table. Henry thanked the court for acknowledging the seriousness, and the judge concluded with a written warning filed into the record that any future attempts would trigger immediate referral to the Attorney General's office. It was not a conviction, but it was public proof that I had not imagined the abuse. That small document became the spine of my peace. Outside the courthouse, the sun was bright, bouncing off car roofs. Reporters were not there for us, but it still felt like a moment of justice under an open sky. The fallout began almost immediately. Sloane's job at the restaurant ended formally 2 days after the hearing. HR terminated her position, citing violation of policy filming customers without consent and posting derogatory comments that damaged the business's reputation. Her final paycheck was docked for missing equipment. When she tried to post about it online, the comments filled quickly with reminders of her own live stream screenshots that refused to disappear. Within a week, her landlord served a 14-day notice for unpaid rent. The second missed month was too much for the owner, who was tired of excuses and public attention. People in her apartment group chat started to share links to the hearing summary posted on a community board. Some even fact-checked her earlier claims that the lobster dinner had been paid for by Jake's card. One woman attached a screenshot from Sloane's own Instagram showing my name blurred on the bill. The irony was so thick I could almost taste it. The internet has a memory longer than guilt. A Boston community Facebook group shared the post with a caption saying, "Actions have receipts." I did not comment, but I read every line once, then closed the app and breathed quietly. The satisfaction was not gloating. It was relief. The kind that comes when light finally touches what has been festering in the dark. Meanwhile, Yelp and Google flagged a 1-star review Sloane had written about Harbor and Hearth, claiming discrimination. The manager uploaded the security report from that night and a short public statement explaining the policy against filming guests. The review disappeared. The restaurant's official page thanked patrons for respecting privacy. For a moment, I thought about the irony of seeing an institution defend boundaries the way I had learned to. Jake kept his head down. He made his second and third payments on time, silent but consistent. He started summer classes at community college. He texted a photo of his class schedule and simply wrote, "Trying." I sent back good work. No emoji, no small talk, just steady encouragement from a safe distance. Miriam and I celebrated quietly with iced tea on her porch, watching gulls circle the water. She asked if I felt proud. I said I felt free. Pride comes later, when peace has settled. Henry called later that evening, saying the case record would stay sealed unless there were future violations. He sounded pleased. "You did everything right, Erica. Not everyone manages to protect themselves without breaking the law or breaking down. You chose both dignity and defense." I thanked him, and when I hung up, I sat for a while listening to the ocean. The waves sounded softer than before. Even small justice has a sound. The next day, the supermarket staff gathered in the break room for a small birthday party for a coworker. Someone brought a store brand cake, the same kind I had eaten alone months earlier. I took a slice and smiled at the taste. It no longer hurt. It was just cake. On my lunch break, I walked by Harbor and Hearth again. The window reflections were bright and ordinary. Inside, new staff replaced the old, and laughter filled the room without cruelty. I paused outside not as a ghost revisiting pain, but as a woman who had survived it. That evening, Miriam joked that we should open a bakery named Boundaries and Bread. I told her I would rather call it Second Chances Cafe. She laughed until tears fell and said, "The first item on the menu should be clam chowder that actually thickens." I smiled because she was right. Money thickens better than flour, but peace thickens best of all. I went to bed early, the window open to the summer air. For the first time in years, I slept without my phone under my pillow, without waiting for a text asking for money, without fear that someone would reach into my life uninvited. It was not revenge that lulled me to sleep, but the simple knowledge that the truth had finally been spoken aloud and written down. If you have ever had to expose the truth publicly just to protect what you worked for, type "protect" in the comments. Because sometimes telling the truth in daylight is the strongest quiet justice there is. By late July, the heat in Massachusetts felt heavy and slow, the kind that stuck to your skin and made every sound in the neighborhood feel louder than usual. I was trimming the rose bushes outside my small porch when the knock came. At first, I thought it was the mail carrier, but when I opened the door, I saw Sloane standing there, mascara-streaked hair tangled, breathing fast like she had run from the bus stop. She tried to smile, but it came out twisted. "Erica, please, can you tell him to take me back? Just tell him I am sorry. Tell him I was stressed." She was talking fast and wiping her face with the back of her hand. For a moment, I just stared at her. The girl who once laughed in a restaurant about store brand cake, who called me a budget mom who mocked my age online. Now she stood on my porch, shaking. I opened the screen door just enough to speak. I am not speaking for someone who called an old mother leftovers. She froze, mouth slightly open. Her eyes darted to the window behind me as if she hoped Jake was there listening. He was not. I waited 1 second, then closed the door gently. No slamming, no yelling, just a quiet ending. Through the curtain, I saw her shoulders collapse. She walked away slowly, hugging herself, and for the first time I felt absolutely nothing for her. Not anger, not satisfaction, just distance. Healing started as a small decision the next morning. I went to the phone store in town and asked to separate the family plan. The clerk typed for several minutes and then said Jake's number could be moved to a prepaid monthly plan for $30. I paid the first month and sent him a short message with a 1-page budget sheet. Nothing fancy, just clear numbers, income bills, limits, reminders, a humble blueprint for someone learning to stand on his own. I did not include any lecture, only a line at the bottom saying "paid not owed." Jake replied with a simple, "Thank you." No apology. No requests. It was the first time he took help without reaching for my wallet. That night, I made a decision that felt almost rebellious. I created a small self-care fund, $150 every month just for me. No guilt, no hesitation. I signed up for a weekend watercolor class at a community center near Marblehead. When I arrived on the first Saturday, the instructor handed me a clean sheet of paper and a tin of paints. The colors looked bright and new, like possibilities I had never given myself. My hand trembled a little at first, but when I made the first soft blue brushstroke, my heart eased. It felt like learning to breathe with my own lungs instead of someone else's. The next week, I booked a haircut. I had kept the same shoulder-length style for years because it was practical and safe. That day, I asked the stylist for a bob, light, neat, and fresh. When she spun the chair, and I saw myself in the mirror, silver streaks catching light cheekbones, sharper neck free, I almost laughed. I looked like a woman who had stepped out of someone else's story and into her own. On Sunday, Miriam and I drove to Newport. We ate lobster rolls by the pier, the irony not lost on either of us. When the wind lifted my hair, I let it fall across my face, carefree and messy. For the first time in a long while, I did not think about what someone else would say. I thought only about the ocean and the sky and the way freedom sounded when seagulls cried overhead. Back in August, Jake came to my house with tools and a small backpack. He replaced a loose kitchen cabinet hinge, tightened a leaking faucet, and took out the trash. We sat at my table afterward, eating clam chowder he brought from a local deli. He did not ask for help. He did not make excuses. He simply said, "Mom, are you all right these days?" I looked at him and saw the same boy who once stood on a baseball field holding a glove too big for his hand. He was trying. Not perfectly, not proudly, just quietly. And it mattered. That evening, he texted a picture of a therapy schedule, 2 appointments booked and paid in advance. Under the photo, he wrote, "I am working on myself. No pressure. Just want you to know." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed a short reply. Good. Keep going. A week later, I received another photo, a class registration form at Bunker Hill Community College. English composition and math for liberal arts. 2 classes, real classes. Underneath, he wrote, "I want to do this right." I printed the photo and tucked it inside my blue folder. It was not proof of perfection. It was proof of change. Healing does not always come loud. Sometimes it comes in small repairs and honest eye contact and 2-hour visits where no one asks for money. Sometimes it arrives in watercolor strokes drying in the sun or in the quiet joy of choosing a dress, just because it makes you feel alive. One afternoon, Miriam and I tried making clam chowder at home. It came out thin and watery, more soup than chowder. Miriam tasted it, winced, and said, "Money thickens better than flour." I laughed so hard I had to sit down. That short, foolish moment felt more like healing than any dramatic scene could. Life was becoming gentle again, and gentle had been missing for too long. By the end of August, I felt like a different version of myself. Not younger, not richer, not louder, just freer. Sometimes justice does not end with punishment. Sometimes it ends with peace. I learned to walk every morning, paint every Saturday shop for myself without guilt, and speak small sentences that carried weight. No means no. Enough means enough. And love means boundaries, not sacrifice. I looked at my reflection one evening while brushing my hair and saw a woman who had been invisible now visible, a mother reclaimed, a life restored. A chapter turned. Jake stood outside my porch one night, hands in pockets, shy like a teenager. He asked if he could bring chowder next week and fix the loose deck board. I nodded. He smiled a little. Not sorry, not desperate, just present. Healing looked like that, simple, quiet, earned. Sloan never came back. I heard she moved to Quincy with a roommate and picked up part-time shifts at a diner. Sometimes the universe writes its own endings, but I no longer tracked her story. Mine was finally enough. I put a bookmark in my watercolor notebook and whispered the truth that carried me through every dark moment. I am not an ATM. I am a mother, and I am allowed to live. August brought cooler evenings and a softer kind of sunlight to Boston, the kind that made the city feel almost forgiving. By then, Jake had made 5 consecutive payments of $380, always on the 5th day of the month, never late, never with an excuse. 5 small bricks laid on the road back to dignity. He also registered for 2 full semesters at Bunker Hill Community College, math for liberal arts in the fall, English composition in the spring. Henry drafted a short addendum stating that if Jake earned a B+ or higher for 2 semesters, his $529 funds would be released directly to the school for future classes. Not to Jake, not to his account, but to the school, a boundary that still offered help without surrender. Jake signed without hesitation. Something in his face had changed since that night at Harbor and Hearth. The panic was gone, replaced by a quiet understanding that love meant responsibility, not access. One warm afternoon, he asked if I wanted to walk with him through Christopher Columbus Park. I agreed. We walked slowly along the trellis path where vines curled above our heads and children ran in loose circles near the fountain. Jake carried a small box from Mike's Pastry. Inside was a Boston cream cupcake with a single candle pushed gently into the center. He stopped near a bench, cleared his throat, and said, "This time I am here first, not after the photos, not after the champagne, just first." He lit the candle with a small lighter and waited while I watched the tiny flame flicker. For a moment I saw the boy he used to be excited for birthdays, proud of handmade cards. I closed my eyes and made a wish not for him to change because he already had. I wished for myself, to keep the strength I fought so hard to build. When I blew out the candle, Jake smiled and handed me the cupcake. We sat on the bench, listening to the ocean on the other side of the harbor wall. He told me about his classes, his part-time job delivering groceries, and how he was slowly paying down his credit card without asking for help. He said he had deleted old friends who encouraged carelessness, and he had blocked Sloan permanently, not out of hate, but out of survival. When it was time to leave, he hugged me gently, not clinging, not demanding, just present. That evening, after washing the dishes, I drove to Castle Island. The wind carried salt and laughter from families picnicking by the shore. I walked along the stone path, shoes brushing sand and small shells. When I reached the edge of the water, I took out my wallet and removed the folded note I had written on my birthday. The same note I had placed under the cake and left on my table like a quiet declaration of independence. You chose a $300 lobster over me. I chose a locked door and the law. I read the words slowly as the tide moved in and out. Back then, the sentence had tasted like broken glass and salt. Now it tasted like strength. I refolded the note into a small square and slid it into a hidden pocket in my wallet, not as a reminder of pain, but as a charm against forgetting my own worth, an amulet of self-respect. There was no anger left in me, just space, wide, calm space, the kind that comes only after a storm has passed and every loose branch has already fallen. I stood watching the sky deepen from gold to blue. The surface of the water shimmered under the last of the sun. Somewhere behind me, children laughed and a dog barked at waves, too big to chase. Life was moving forward steady and unhurried. I thought of all the years I spent believing love meant sacrifice. Of all the times I swallowed my needs to keep the peace. Now I understood something simple and sharp. Peace built on silence is not peace. It is self-erasure. Real peace has walls and doors and locks. Real peace stands firm and says, no, I am not an ATM. I am a mother, a woman, a person with boundaries and dignity. The ocean breeze lifted my hair and cooled my face. I whispered a thank you to the version of myself who finally walked away instead of waiting to be chosen. Without her courage, I would still be sitting in that quiet house with cold cake and a lonely candle. I walked back to my car under street lamps that glowed like small moons. When I started the engine, my phone buzzed. A message from Jake. Finished my homework early. Want to help you repaint the porch this weekend. Let me know. I smiled. He was rebuilding himself 1 week at a time, and I was rebuilding myself too. Not as a mother who gave until she was empty, but as a woman who learned that self-respect is worth more than any apology. When I pulled out of the parking lot, I glanced once more at the ocean. It looked endless and bright, like a future. If you believe that self-respect is also a form of saving, leave a heart in the comments. I will read every single one.